Ali here at UNE does not need any introduction.
No.
He's been here a long time, and his sabbatical research is research for his next book, which will be coming out from Stanford University Press maybe next year.
God's will.
Somewhere around there. And Ali's written a lot of books about the politics of Libya and North Africa. Of course, the relationship between Europe and the Arab world is in the news a lot right now. And Ali's research is a good way to remember that their relationship goes back a long way and has been complicated for a long time. And as hard as it is to understand what's going on in the present, it's still difficult to understand what was going on in the past. And understanding that one can really help illuminate the other. So, all right, please join me in welcoming Ali Amin.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you for coming this time of the afternoon. And it's good to see a lot of our students and faculty and staff and also people from the community. So happy to see everybody. I want to tell you two stories. One is about a journey, a very tough journey I have been taking in pursuing this research project, and the smaller story about my sabbatical. The bigger story started 15 years ago. I discovered that what happened between 1929 and 1933 in Libya, which was a colony of Italy, the only North African country that was colonized by Italy. And at that time, that particular time, between 29 and 33, the fascist colonial regime in Libya interned the total civilian population of Eastern Libya. Now, the estimate we have, me and my Italian colleagues and my Libyan colleagues, range from the lowest was 80,000 people. The highest is 120,000 people. The Italian military records say 80,000. But our estimate is much higher. And me and my Italian senior colleague, Angelo Del Bocca, we think at least 100,000 people. That included children, elderly, men and women. They were deported from their homes in northeastern Libya, the region of the Green Mountain. Come on. Come on, Eric. Zach, come in and probably a chair here. And then in 1933-34, they were released. The context of what happened, it was a war to crush anti-colonial resistance. It was a very brilliant movement led by somebody who, I always say, a combination of Zapata and Villa. But a more pious, more determined elderly man by the name of Omar al-Mukhtar. And my students who are taking Poli-Sci 105 know a little bit about that character. There is a Hollywood movie by the name of Lion of the Desert, a rare movie, but captures that period of North African Mediterranean history. Out of this total number of people interned, this is, mind you, before the Holocaust. The estimate that I reached after 10 years of calculating and tracing, we think 60,000 perished in these camps. Now, this is not a casualty of war or an accident of war. The archival evidence that we consulted and myself found states very clearly that they want to crush the resistance at any price, and because the civilian population was supporting the resistance, then they were determined, even they said, the general who was behind it, that even if we eliminate all of them, be it, the progress of the Italian people will not be stopped by a bunch of nomads and semi-nomads. So this was what happened between 29 and 33. Then I began to say this should be known to most Western scholars, Italian scholars, American scholars. And to my surprise, the whole, with a few exceptions, I'm going to show you in my slides here. In Italy, the memory was suppressed. I mean, we are not talking about how the brain works and how the memory works. The whole episode was repressed inside Italy, and in its place, there was a concerted myth created, and for all kind of reason, called Gli Italiani brava gente, means the Italians are good people, in contrast with the German who are nasty, brutal, and hard. Then I began to pursue it a little bit more, and I decided to, okay, in Italy, it was, the whole memory was suppressed. What happened in England and what happened in the United States? 2005, I published a book called, I called it Forgotten Voices. I wrote it here at UNE. And the heart of this book was a chapter on the camps, my research on the camps and the interned. Then it got the attention of many schools, the top schools in the United States, and whenever I go to Harvard, to Yale, Berkeley, UCLA, Washington University, Columbia, I ask my audiences, including a center at Yale, which was our oldest center for the study of genocide. Has anybody heard of this case? And to my surprise, everybody say no. They look at me like, is there such a thing, Ali? And then I began to think about it in a larger sense. Now, between 2000, the year 2000, until last year, I decided to pursue it. And when I began this project, I spoke with one of my 3 living mentors. One of them is a very quiet historian, Ottoman historian, and he said to me something I thought he was exaggerating. He said, Ali, this is a huge topic. It's going to take you 10 years to excavate it. And I said, 10 years? Who want to spend 10 years doing this? Life is short. I want to do something fun. I want to write something interesting. And I said, and then this old man was right. It was such a complex and messy topic. It took 10 years. And why it took 10 years? Because the record in Arabic was collected, but very partial. People, even in Libya, a historian who studied it a little bit, and there was one historian who wrote a master thesis on it. In Italy, my 2 Italian colleagues, they told me, don't waste your time with the Italian archives. We've spent 40 years. We think the Italian state, dominated by fascist officers, manipulated and got rid of some of the nasty files. Then I went to our own American archives for 2 summers. And I found few things because they were taken from the Italian archives by accident. So that theft, or that kind of a confiscation of the Italian archives turned to be a good thing, because they kept it here. Then I consulted the Tunisian, later on, which was 2014, and Egyptian archives to see if there's any record of it. And I found some, but was very, very, very limited. Then I remember I had 2 conversations with the Italian scholar Angelo Del Bocca, and the father of what we call the oral history in the United States, where Michelle and I think Rick studied at the University of Wisconsin. His name is Jean Vancina. we regard him as the father of oral history in African studies. His work has been criticized and evaluated, but really he was the pioneer of the oral history project. And they both, encouraged me to do the oral history. And under the book, I said, what should I do? I said, if you can get hold of the survivors in Libya, that would be the most valuable thing. And if they agree to talk to you, that will be very, very important. So I began a very complex process, trying to go time and again to all of these archival places, and also collect oral history. And when I gained the trust of the people and their families, they began to talk to me. And the university, there is a small center in Libya, in eastern Libya, in western Libya, called the Libyan Studies Center. I helped them in the 90s with some projects, and then they gave me a gift. Because Vansina helped them collect thousands of oral history, they gave me all the interviews that they had made in the 1970s, around 80 to 100 ones, of people who are deceased, for that matter. And then the project began to evolve. Another complexity was I tried to learn about a field that was so new to me, that's genocide studies in Europe. And I think I shared with you, with some of you, that the genocide studies is the most dominant and most important in Western scholarship. And it's an ocean. It's an ocean of studies. It's so elaborate and so wide. I had numerous conversations with Eric Zulu, who teaches, the Holocaust and also the genocide studies here at UNE. And I realized this is really very, very big. But what I tried to do is to look at the state of the art, the most important works that are related to me and my research. The material I collected was written in 3 languages: Arabic, Italian, and English. And the language spoken in Eastern Libya is very peculiar. It's, and very specific. It has its own vocabulary, and I had to re-educate myself on that, even though my grandmother is from Eastern Libya. So this became really a tough topic, and it evolved. Every time I think I have excavated more material, I discovered that's a new lead. And I was frustrated with the fact I wasn't sure what I'm going to find, but there was something very interesting, very, very valuable for me. I didn't know what I'm going to find out. So every time I discovered a new thing, every time I began to connect the dots. And then eventually I began to go to the places of the camps. Out of the 10 ones, the 5 terrible ones. And I began to go to collect any material I think there, including the cemeteries. And I began to study how people bury their dead ones. So it became more than one project. And as I took my sabbatical leave out of this, really, after this long introduction, I set myself to do 3 tasks. The first one was to read the material I collected. The second is to listen to the 150 interviews numerous times and see what I found in them. And the third task, to take a short trip to Tunisian archives. And the reason I wanted to go to Tunisia, I thought maybe the French colonial state in Tunisia, being neighboring to Libya, could have maybe left some records of it. And I went there, I found some material about other areas, but not about the camps. So then I said to myself, enough, we cannot spend another 10 years because we'll be dead. And I decided that to start reading and listening, and also put together the chapters outline, and I began to write. I accomplished all of my goals of reading the material, educating myself about genocide studies. I also began to figure out what's really the oral history is all about in all its diverse ways and its problems. And then I studied also, I had a feeling about what are the major original theoretical pieces and scholarship on the Holocaust and genocide in Europe. So what aided me in this whole process, the fact in graduate school, some of you know it, a few of you know about this, I really have a multidisciplinary background. My degree was in political science, and I specialized in theory and comparative. But at the University of Washington, I took two fields outside political science. One is historical sociology, the other one is African history and anthropology. They became very handy in this project. So what I try to do is really to have many hats. The hat of the political scientist and theorist, and comparativist, the hat of the historian, and the hat of the anthropologist. I accomplished the first three goals. The goal of writing the book was delayed because of unexpected discoveries, which I'm going to tell you about it shortly as I share with you the slides here. So this is really an overview of what I tried to do in the larger picture since 2000. This is what I set myself to accomplish during my sabbatical leave. And what I was going to share with you is some pictures, some slides, some chapter titles, and questions that I try to pursue and keep revising as I try to make sense of that material. Now, before I continue, I know some of you, the students, have to leave at 3 o'clock. That's perfectly fine with me. I'm not going to be offended if you have to leave, but keep that in mind. The other thing that I would like to share with you is also some terrible pictures that I wasn't aware of. And I'm going to warn you, there are pictures that are going to be gory and horrible. I hate to say that after lunch and a sunny day like this. So I just want to warn you, and you could blame me for scaring you a little bit or bringing that to your attention. So this is, I called it Genocide and Silence, because I really wanted, my research was about excavating and interrogating what happened. And silence, I thought that my book should make sense and try to explain why this case, the first major genocide after World War I, disappeared. So I want to study what happened in Italy, what happened in our Western scholarship, and what happened also in other parts of the globe that really became not aware of it. So almost I wanted to theorize silence. And silence can mean a lot of things, not just one thing. So that was very important. Two footnotes are important to give you the larger picture of this complex research. I decided to visit Washington, D.C., the Holocaust Museum. And I wanted to see what they have done, what's the philosophy behind it, how they constructed, what kind of thinking behind it. And it was very, very fruitful visit. The second thing, I decided memory is not about the politics of memory. Then, as it, on these different continents, I sent a questionnaire, 5 questions to colleagues in 7 Libyan universities. I want to see how the youth today view what happened then. And there, in some sense, I wanted to see the reaction to it. Did they know about it? Have they got sick of it and they want to move on? What's the really they remember out of that? And I think that also added to the book that become revised and emerging out of various revisions. Now, I thought to give you an idea about what I'm talking about, how this case is really viewed in a different way. Prime Minister Berlusconi said, they tried to defend the idea of moderate or benign Italian fascism. that fascism in Italy was a dictatorship, a benign one. Hannah Arendt, who is, of course, as you know, one of our most eminent theorists, a German philosopher, an American immigrant, I don't think she was aware of what happened in Libya. So she always said there was no Jewish question in Italy under fascism, and it was just a normal dictatorship. However, to her credit, in her book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, she wrote something very brilliant and very perceptive, and I'm pursuing it. She said, if you want to understand what happened in Europe under the Holocaust, you've got to understand what happened in the Congo and other genocides in Africa. Few scholars pursue that very rigorously. Now there are few of us who are pursuing that, and I'm trying to see to what extent that's the case. But in the case of Libya, she did not. Now, one of the letters I found in archives is Marshal Pietro Badoglio wrote a letter to Graziani basically saying what I summed to you, that if you have to crush all of them, do that.
So is that a name for Libya?
Yes.
Ali?
Yes. And then one of the people who studied that case, a journalist by the name of Eric Salerno, quoted this, and he said, every day we buried 50 people in the camps. Now, the method, as I shared with you, is I'm trying to apply a post-colonial theory and also combine, that with three main questions I thought guided me, and I kept kind of thinking of them. Why does the dominant image of Italian fascism persist in the public media and in scholarly studies? What are some of the moral and scholarly flaws of this myth of Italian fascism? And how does recovered evidence of Libyan genocide between 29 and 53 undermine common misconceptions concerning the nature of Italy's brand of fascism? What I'm trying to do, I did that before in a couple of articles in European journals. Some of you read my piece on when subaltern speak, or when subaltern speak in response to other studies. I try to challenge that this field of studies in Europe, and I'm product of multiple area studies and a different discipline. But my goal now is really to undermine the area studies, because I feel the area studies are really provincial and really limiting. Because one of the main arguments I'm trying to make is we have to go beyond regions and areas and to look at the unit of analysis that goes beyond the nation state and beyond just a region in general. And my book is going to try to flush that argument in general. In other words, if you read, European studies, genocide studies in Europe, and genocide studies and African studies, and other area studies, and try to bridge them, or we try to bridge memory studies and also oral history studies, then this conversation could lead to something very fruitful and very, very, very interesting for all of us. This is what I'm talking about for just a general geographical imagination. As you see, Libya is very huge. And this is a map of Libya. The region I'm talking about is eastern Libya. That's the Green Mountain, that peninsula there. What the Italian did is to took the population either by ships or on foot with their herds to the desert of Sirte here, which is a very harsh desert. What I try to do is to challenge that dominant historiographical view and argue against the method, as I mentioned earlier. And one of the things I think guided me in doing this research is one cannot study Italy without studying Libya, or Libya without studying Italy. The scholarly dominant paradigm now is to study area study, or study how Europe colonized, say, Africa or Asia or Latin America. I think that's important. What I'm trying to do is to see not only how Europe undermined or colonized Asia or Africa or Latin America, but to see how the impact of the colonies on Europe and us on the United States. And when you look at both, it gives you a different view. It's as if you look at the larger picture. I classified the scholarship on the subject into three trends: Italian colonial scholarship, Eurocentric genocide scholarship, and Libyan nationalist scholarship. Now, there are people who really were alternative and they captured some of these questions, or at least raised questions that allow me to pursue and build on what they raised earlier. The Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci, in his prison notes, post-colonial intellectuals like Aimé Césaire, Frantz Fanon, Samir Amin, and Mahmoud Mamdani, the British social anthropologist E. Evans Pritchard, and Italian colleagues, two elderly historians. They were really almost kind of exceptional because they refused to be co-opted. Giorgio Rochat, Angelo Del Bocca, a journalist by the name of Eric Salerno, and a colleague by the name of Nicola Labanca, an Italian American scholar at NYU by the name of Ruth B. Gayat as well. They all challenged that point of view that I was talking about. Now, these are the camps. The camps are between 10 to 12, but the most horrific camps were these ones. One near Benghazi called Taria, the other camp called Silub, and then the other one called Sidi Ahmed al-Magroon, the Brega, and Agela. Agela, I describe it as in the horrible example of Auschwitz. It's where all the people who were relative of the guerrillas fighting the Italian state were put there. The children, the women, and the elderly there. And I went to all of these places with my camera and my recording 3 times. And some are completely, unfortunately, now no longer exist. The 2 camps, the Brega and Agela, are still available. And I went to the cemeteries where I, was taking pictures. Now the sources for I classified the sources to memoirs. I said, I'm going to collect any memoirs. Have they left memoirs? What kind of memoirs they written? And I found a couple of them. They were literate, and they wrote those memoirs. Now I discovered 90% of them were illiterate, nomads and semi-nomads. But also they had something completely culturally specific to Eastern Libya. They composed folk oral poetry. So when they were interned, men and women were composing poems. And I've got 2 volumes full of those poems. I just a footnote here, and I tried to find pictures. I've been trying very hard to find pictures of those poets. And I remember I discovered by accident that the grandson of one of the poets, her name is Al-Khair, was a diplomat in New York City, a Libyan diplomat. So I was giving a talk at Columbia, and he came to my talk, and we talked. And then I said, could you please find me? He said, I'm the grandson of so and so and so. I said, could you find me a photo of her? He said, okay, I'll try. Then a year later, he called me and I said, I have a gift for you. First, we checked you out. We asked who's your father, who's your mother, who's your, who's in your extended family, are you credible or not? And they did all of that screening and vetting of my, thank God they didn't vet my life here in Maine. And then he sent me this photo, a rare photo of his grandmother who was going to the Hajj, to the pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. And I remember in the 3rd floor, I was high-fiving everybody in the 3rd floor. I was in heaven. It took almost 10 years to find a face that I'm going to put there. And I'm still grateful to this guy. It became a nice friendship since he's now in Switzerland working for the United Nations. So for poetry, culturally specific source, very important, and then my own field work where I interviewed around 50 people, and what I did to overcome the fuzzy of memory, and so I decided to interview people twice. And I decided also to stay in touch and ask about people who were with them. And it became very, very interesting, maddening like crazy, because you had to listen to these interviews 2 or 3 times for hours just to make sense of it. Then I began to be specific. I classified my questions to subtopics. When they were deported, their daily life in the camps, what kind of food have they been fed or not, what kind of clothes they have, any clothes or not, and then what happened to when they get ill or they had psychological trauma and somebody died there. And then I discovered, after, of course, I went with a number of Libyan scholars one time to the camps, and they began, when I asked them, then they said, Ali, these are so American questions. You're asking him. I said, I want to know how their daily life is. This makes sense. You can't just say they died and the Italian army was horrible. So then I discovered something began to emerge. They died, and many of them were children and elderly. They gave them only a little bit of barley or rice. So they didn't feed them. And then when they get ill, they refused to treat them. Third factor was crucial. Their herds, thousands of herds, camels, sheep, goats, and cattle perished. And that devastation of the herds was the most severe. So what happened is that the vast majority of them died. They caught diseases, and they died. I remember the worst thing for my trip, and this is really not a very hard topic. I mean, sometimes they have to chill out just to not, to compose myself. When I saw the miles of tombs and graves, it was horrific. And then it became a bigger responsibility, because the material I have here in Maine, nobody has. The oral history, people in Libya have some oral history, but they don't have the archival material, they don't have all of these sources. So everything here in Maine is really worth, this is the memory of this group of people, and I began to feel the responsibility for this. Now, these are some pictures I found in the archives, so we'll give you an idea. They put them in tents, 6 to 10 people in these tents. This is an aerial view of the Abyar concentration camp. This is a fenced one. Now, some of the rebels, or the one who was accused of association, they were hanged just to send a message. And sometimes there were mass graves where they buried, and these also I found in the archives. And this reminds me of the Holocaust, because there are people who are amputated or buried collectively by the Italian army. And here, the trips to find these people, who, mind you, when they were interned, they were children, between 10 to 15 to 16, 17. Most of them now are dying. I think within 5 years, you will not have many of them alive. So that was a group of people who were interviewed and commemorating the internment, and they invited me, so I flew to Benghazi and I joined them there. These are some of the survivors. This specific man has an iron memory. It's incredible memory, and he gave me a gift at the end of the day when I visited him in Benghazi. He drew a map of the Agela camp from memory, with details, and he gave it to me. So it was very, very interesting. And he was with his mother, because his father was one of the guerrillas. And this is another visit, 2008, and I went to interview this man who came to see me with his son in the background, and I interviewed him next to a mosque. This is another small village in eastern Libya. I went there. They had they were mourning the death of somebody, and they felt so sorry for me. So he came all the way from America. We're going to grant you an interview. So this man let me interview him, but at the same time his voice is so low, and I couldn't really hear him, and it was very, very tough one. But he kept telling me the story when he was with his family in one of their camps. This is another one. And over there you see there's the traditions in eastern Libya is you put your shoes outside, you come to a rug, and you relax there in the living room. And that was the traditional Libyan dress. And this man was telling me about his internment with his family too. These are two Libyan historians. One of the things I thank God I kept is I stayed in touch with Libyan colleagues. And I think one of the things that I always say to colleagues who ask me about when they go for research is don't cut ties or think that only you go to the research. There are scholars in many of these parts of Africa, and they are doing good work, and treat them with respect and recognize what they are trying to offer is always a good idea. But not everybody will go that route. Most people go to the archives and they go to the research or survey, and they ignore local African scholars or Arab scholars or Latin scholars. And that's very, very important, of course. I know that BRIC has been terrific in bringing all of those African brothers and sisters to UNE, and this is the way to go, definitely. The two historians, have been terrific, and they always go with me to these places, and I use long distance calls all the time, and sometimes they even use a little bit of grant here and there just to stay in touch with this research. This is a wonderful lady. She was interned with her mother. She is in her late 80s, but she has incredible memory and she's in good health. And she let me interview her for 3 hours in 2 sessions, 2 days. And this is a traditional Libyan dress, colorful. As you could tell, it's not the dark chador of Eastern Middle East. This is a North African Libyan dress, very different. Now, this is some of the horrors that I found. The Italians severed one of the gorillas' head. And this is also some of the things, the rebels that they find, they sever their heads there. This is the legendary, wonderful, pious leader who refused to be bribed. His name is Omar al-Mukhtar. And after he was captured, the Italian decided to release the interned civilian in 1933. That's his capture, the real picture of Omar al-Mukhtar in his Libyan dress. He was 73 years old.
So you're saying the camps closed? People were released?
Because after that, they really crushed the resistance. After they captured him and hanged him in public, in one of the camps, by the way, in front of everybody. And Omar al-Mukhtar became really the father of modern Libya, folks. I'll tell you a story. I went to visit the Libyan ambassador at New York, and Gaddafi's picture was out. But guess what was in the back? Omar al-Mukhtar's picture. So Libyans will not agree on a lot of things. They don't agree with a lot of things. One thing they would agree upon is this legendary leader who is really known all over the Middle East and Muslim world. This is one of the most celebrated and respected modern anti-colonial leaders. Now, this is the general who was behind the whole internment. He was a bloody, brutal general by the name of Rodolfo Graziani. Now, the fall of last fall specifically, as I was reading the material, I stumbled into new stuff that I didn't know. And let me briefly tell you, I was kicked out of the archives in 1986 as a PhD student. I tried to go there and I was frustrated with them. but I found support among other Italian scholars. Then 2 years ago, I came with an idea. Now, Graziani wrote his memoirs, two versions of it. What if I could get hold of his papers? Maybe his papers would have more record, different material than included in his memoirs. And I'm not going to tell you how I got hold of his papers, because that's a really almost like, I don't want to say James Bond, but also two Italian wonderful archivists who knew me gave me a gift that I'm going to be indebted to them the rest of my life. They said, we have something for you. I flew to Italy, and last fall I came with a treasure, which is the papers of the general. We printed them here at UNE, and I began to read them, and the material has been tremendous, because he was so arrogant, he included everything he did, including what happened in the camps. So that was an incredible one. Four of his box of his was very, very important. And then I discovered in the papers there were two internments that I'm not aware of, and I spent almost 15 years doing this. The town that completely was deported called Hun, and then Jado of Jewish Libyans in 1938 because of the alliance with Mussolini, with Hitler. The town of Hun, two friends, when they knew that I was interested, they gave me all of the collected material they had done, and I have it here with me, and I had to read it. Then the French archives in Tunisia had something about Libyan fleeing the camps in Libya, but there's nothing in the camps. Now, another major discovery, which I think is going to change our thinking about at least aspect of the Holocaust and the Nazi state. I discovered for the first time that the Nazi state sent 4 delegations to Libya with the idea of learning from how efficient and how successful the Italian fascists were in Libya. I don't read German. I send it to a colleague, a German who teaches in Ireland, and I have been in touch with him, and he confirmed what I found. And he sent me more material in English. So that really is going to be very, very important in many ways. Now, this is me in the 6th grade. And the reason I put it there, because my grandmother, who died in exile, had relatives who were interned. And my father, when he was alert, he told me a lot about that connection. So this is really not only a scholarly thing, but also it was a way of bringing justice and fairness to some members of my mother's family who were interned in these camps. So I'm sorry it took me a little bit longer, but this is really an overview of what I tried to do. I accomplished the first 2 goals, but the 3rd goal, I only finished 2 chapters. I'm writing a 3rd chapter, and I had to slow down the book because of these discoveries and because of the complexity of the project. And I can't wait to finish it because it's exhausted me. On this note, let me stop. I'm really sorry it took me that long to finish this, and the floor is open now for questions and comments.
So I'm curious, Ali, if you would say more about when you were able to get your hands on the papers of the general who was in charge. What sort of things are you finding there?
Specific orders about the deportation, about also the plan what to do with the deported ones, names of the camps, number of the camps, some material about also the Libyans who worked for the as a capos in the camps, and also some Eritrean colonial soldiers worked there. So and the deportation, how they moved people from their homes in eastern Libya to the desert, that was very, very fresh new material. Also files of people who collaborated with the Italian state too. So it give a lot of context about it, and give me evidence that come from the general himself. Also, I discovered the 2 cases of internment that I'm not aware of at all. So it gave me confirmation of some of the things that I was not aware of, and a new pursuit of the internment and the plan and the budget. Not only the budget, Brian, the budget for these deportations and also constructions. And finally, I discovered that they also exiled many figures to the Italian islands and to Sicily, and many of them died there. So the numbers for how many, around 5,000 of them were deported to Italy, and I had no idea about that either. So it gave a little bit of more almost, let's say, empirical, statistical, colonial view of what happened, and the language also they use for it, how they justify it. It's always, of course, there is a good rationale for that. So those, those files were very, very useful for me in giving me concrete evidence from the Italian colonial perspective. Jeannie.
Thank you so much, Ali. What can you tell us about, you mentioned the guerrillas a number of times. I mean, was this the level of civil war? Was it a small-scale insurgency? You know, from the Italian perspective, these camps were necessary to, just tell us more about what was going on that brought this on.
Yeah, well, Libya in 1911 was part of the Ottoman Empire. Western Libya was very much settled, part of the urban structure of the state, the Ottoman state. Southern Libya was the frontier region. Keep your gunpowder dry, and that's the frontier region of Libya. Eastern Libya had the most interesting Sufi social reformist movement called the Sanusiya. And the founder of that movement was an Algerian scholar who focused on education and trade, and built a very sophisticated civil society in a way. I mean, I'm extending there. A very sophisticated network of trade, education, and school. And it was not racial or national. It was a multiracial or multicultural. And you have there the most excelled leaders of that movement, 19th century, come from Sudan, from Chad, from Niger, from Algeria, from Morocco, from Egypt, from Sudan. So when the Italian came, they crushed the resistance in Western Libya. In Eastern Libya, they faced a very, not only armed society, because they had to protect their herds and their property in the absence of a strong state, a very integrated, mobilized society to nations for its own kind of community. So it's almost a state within a state.
So not so much for Libya, but more for this movement.
Yes, yeah. So therefore, the Italians took them with modern army and modern weapons 20 years to crush it. And it took draconian policies, including the internment and the starvation of people in these camps, to crush that resistance. And eventually they succeeded, of course, but at a heavy price and after 20 years of resistance. So interning and starving the civilian population was not an accident from the evidence I collected, but because they really wanted to crush the resistance and bring 500,000 Italians to settle them in Eastern Libya. Libya was a settled colony, and the dream of the fascists was to turn it to a place, the so-called solve the demographic problem in Italy, of course. Yes, Tom.
Sorry if I missed it, Ali, but just a numerical overview of what you're uncovering. So let's say 100,000 people were interned
Yes.
and moved to this desert
Yeah.
area. And approximately, what is your best guess for how many died within the
I would
camps,
say-
and then
I would say
how many were returned to their homeland?
The number, I think the number that perished in the camps up to 60,000. Some 60.
60.
60. Yeah, 60,000. Now, it gives you an idea. The Baydar ethnic group was made of their number when they were interned 30,000. You know how many were released in 33? 13,000. Just one ethnic group. Some Libyan historian thinks it's more, but I think I would say 60 is a safe one. It might be less 50, but I would say it's Angelo Del Bocca agrees with me on that record, the Italian historian. Mike.
So I'm interested in this kind of hidden or forgotten nature of this genocide.
Yeah.
And you talk about how it's been repressed, and I assume you mean in Italy they've kind of repressed it and don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you think it was widely known at the time. And I'm thinking about it in contrast to our current situation in which America's involved in lots of wars that a lot of people don't know about. A lot of people don't know about the killing in our name. Were these things widely known in Italy at the time or not?
Well, I think the answer is varies, Mike. I think in Italy the state had a very, very particular reason to suppress the case. And when they talk about it, they talk about it as a way of really capturing the bad guys and educating the nomadic population that's very primitive. There are a lot of people who don't know about it. And I think it's the success of the fascist state at that time that made the case completely obscure or really not known. Also, what happened, I discovered, for example, in 1934, and one of my students, I think Sean, found me a book about the World Cup, the soccer World Cup in 1934 in Italy. That was a huge, big thing. Now, also, when the Italian invaded Libya, there was some Western media there. In that particular period, the Italian did not allow anybody to go there. So, add to that, the way the Italian fascists was defeated, the way the Allies took over Italy, the large communist party, the most populous communist party in Italy, the politics of the end of the World War II itself. So even the Allies, they, I'm talking about including FDR, they were really not interested in really giving the Soviet Union some excuse, or the Communist Party some excuse to make it a big deal in that sense. And keep in mind, Italian fascism and romance for Italy is very deep-rooted in that sense. So that aided a little bit. But it's true, a lot of people, not because they're suppressing it, because they didn't know. One chapter of the book is going to deal with what exactly happened, how that suppression and how that alternative idea, who was behind the idea of Italian fascism is benign and moderate and not really brutal, how that was received there. I'm going to have a whole chapter on that. But this is what, Angelo Del Bocca has a whole book about this, and he said in Italy that was the case. And now I'm looking at, I kept asking Betty Wolf and others, what was the image of Italian fascism when you were growing up in the United States? What was really, what comes to you? And I'm looking now at the National Geographic, at the New York Times, bestsellers, and other people who wrote about it, and I'm trying to find not only the suppression of memory, or the censorship of memory to be more accurate, but also people don't know for all kind of reasons. And that will be included in the book very much. Okay, Michelle.
So in your description of today's talk, you say that rather than looking at Libya just in the context of its region, that it's more informative to look at this situation in a global capitalist economic context.
Yes.
And so what I'm interested to know is what are some of the economic history linkages between Italy and Libya, such that fascist Italy came to Libya?
Well, Libya, of course, Libya was seen as part of the drive for colonies and the drive for imperialism at that time in 19th century. And it was the last region in North Africa that was not taken by the British or the French. And Libya used to be called a bucket of sand because it's a huge country, and thank God they didn't know there was oil there. I think Mussolini is spinning in his grave now, knowing that it wasn't the case. But Michel, one of the reasons is the glory, competing with the other rival states in Europe, and the demographic question, where the landlords in southern Italy made a deal with the northern industrialists. And the idea is that we're not going to give land reform to the peasants in the south, and we're going to solve it in a colony, a place where not be humiliated like in Argentina or in other parts of the globe where they are mistreated, so and so. So having a colony of our own, we could resolve it and make it part of the. And guess what's really the rationale and the ideology? We are not really colonizing. We are going back. We are the heirs of the Roman Empire. So ideologically, the justification for the colonization was really a Roman language and Roman reference point. And that's why Mussolini, with the invasion of Ethiopia, he declared the empire. And that's how the language was introduced. It's interesting now, just one further point in answering your question. Libya economically is tied to Italy more than any other country. And Libyans make the best pasta because of the Italian. I think some of you know. John.
Yes, just a question. It seemed like you were raising some questions about inquiry.
Yes.
And I was wondering if the acquiescence of the intelligentsia is part of the problem. Is there kind of a narrative about Italy and colonialism and genocide itself that is part of the problem here?
Yes, a very good question. I think we have to say that the trouble with the genocide studies and the industry on the Holocaust, it's Eurocentric. If it happens to Europe, it's a big thing. It happens in the colonies, really something awful and very fuzzy. And so, what I'm trying to argue is that we have, before we talk about Namibia and the extermination of the Herero people, 80,000 people in 1905, or what happened in the Congo, the 10 millions, or what happened in Algeria, or what happened in the case of Libya, we really need to confront that ghost. That if it happened in Europe, it's important and horrific. If it happens in the colonies, it's tragic, but it's not less important. I would say that as I don't know, Fanon or who said that what's happened in the Holocaust and the conquest of Eastern Europe by the Nazi is they brought something so common in Africa, which is the conquest was colonial and it was settler, and therefore Europe faced the colonial brutality that some communities, especially in settler colonies, have faced there. So I'm really making I'm really hitting the area of studies very hard in my book, and I'm trying to reorient the whole study of genocide, especially Italian fascism. And I think I hope the case will open a new way of thinking about genocide in the 20th century. That's what I'm trying to pursue. Jean.
You rightly embarrassed us for our ignorance about this, but I want to take advantage of having you here to not continue that ignorance into what's happening today.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could, and this is a big question, so summarize, what's the relationship between the Italian occupation and colonization of Libya to the rise and success of the Gaddafi dictatorship, and then what's the relationship of those to the tragedy that we see in Libya today?
That's a very good question,
In
Jeannie.
2 minutes or less.
Yes. Well, very good question. I argue for a long time that Gaddafi's bitter, populist, sometimes even odd behavior, especially when it comes to Italy and what happened during the colonial period, is weird yet justified or contextualized in the memory that a lot of Libyans say nobody cared about us. Half a million perished in 40 years and nobody cared about us. And he was abused and used that memory for his own regime and his own dictatorship to justify it. So that's really huge. When he talks to, at least in the first 10 years after 69, when he talks to ordinary people in Eastern Libya and Southern Libya, they say, he's right, nobody cares about us.
Is he from that region?
He is actually from Central Libya, not far away from the camps. Not far away. He was born maybe a couple of hours away from the camps. And the worst one is the Agela one, is near his place where of birth. So he really used and abused that thing. And I would say if you want to understand Libyan politics under the dictatorship, you try to use the symbol and how he referred to all these battles and camps and internment and deportation and so on. And it had an echo at least for the first 10 years. I would say Libyan modern culture has, I mean, it's really sad because Libyan society only in the second half of 19th century had a very good, peaceful, long period. And the 20 years after independence in the 1950s and 60s. Other than that, they really faced horror, wars, of famine, of wars, of conquest. And that's why the populism in Libya has always going to have a place for it. And there's something really odd about Libyan culture, because the central state has never been dominant. And it sounds very American because these communities, zillions of oases and zillions of towns in the hinterland, always were tenacious in keeping their autonomy from the state. And right now, it drives me crazy. Now, I talked to my sister last week, and I said, how is the situation? They say, no state, no police, no army, and these militias are fighting each other. And I said, you know, how are you guys surviving? And they will not admit to this, but I think society, through consensus, through the decentralized culture, they are managing everyday life. But the trauma, that trauma, I think, I call it the ghosts of the colonial history, our national history. It's still there in a variety of ways. And I don't think populism is going to disappear. The challenge for Libyan society is how to challenge that energy and that kind of memory, and not dismissing everybody because they didn't pay attention to you, or they ignored you, or there was silence about you, but to do it in a more constructive way. And my more immediate goals is to find the names of everybody, pressure the Italian government to give us whatever they have, and scandalizing them, build a museum in Tripoli or in these camps for the memory of these interned, and also make sure that the stories and the names will be recorded, will be collected. So if we do that, I think we'll have some healing and some justice. I'm not crazy about compensation and money and so, but if we could open the gates for maybe other people to come and pursue that, the Agela camp would be in the same situation, similar to what happened in Europe. And there is also another important thing here. Here, Muslims and Jews and gypsies and socialists and gay people who were persecuted, or the Herero, or the people in the Congo, all have commonalities with each other. That should change a lot of dynamics. And I think even when Gaddafi's regime made peace with Berlusconi because of investment, I told a colleague who was in the government at that time that even if they compromise with Berlusconi, I'm not going to give that up, because I would like to pursue that until the end. And we'll see. if that's going to happen. Right now, people are just struggling for stability and security. Dick.
Similar question. You talked about the decentralization of culture within Libya. Where did the idea, what century and who created the sense that there was a geographic Libya? Was that an Ottoman, or was that a Roman, or was it a...
Well, Libya is huge, as I said. It's the third largest city, bigger than Texas. That's just to give you an American analogy here. So it's a big, big state. And no central government could control because of technology, because of resources, because of surplus, and so the rest of the country. So the Ottomans were in Tripoli and Benghazi. The rest of the communities, they managed their own affairs through consensus, through local movements, through local organizations, and they lasted until the Italian invasion. And the Italian, if you think about it, because the resistance lasted until 1931, Libyan society, I argue, is stronger than the state. Now, in Egypt, in Syria, and even in Iraq later on, you find that in Morocco in the 20th century, not in the 19th century, in Tunisia, you find the urban state dominated the peasants and the tribesmen and the nomads. In Libya, I argue, up until the middle of 20th century, the society was stronger than the state. Now, I'm talking about economically, militarily too, and in terms of social ability to escape and maneuver to the frontiers. And in Mexican history, they call it the regions of refuge. Libyan society had these open frontiers where they could run away. You know, you want to catch me in Maine, I'll go to Connecticut. If you catch me in Connecticut, I'm going to go to maybe Illinois. Illinois, I'm going to go to the Northwest, or go to Alaska. And these frontiers were never demarcated for a long time. So up until the middle of 20th century, these autonomous community and their values and their culture and their ability to resist the state, was very much alive. Now, the good side of it is that it's autonomous community. They are organizing their own affairs. The bad side of it, I think Libyans postponed the building of the nation state until today. And I think there's a price for it. You can't just be, always say, down with the state, down with, James Scott would like that, Brian. But I always say to them, you could build a state modern, but also build on your own social institution. They don't have to be either or. And that's the challenge in the 21st century, because the state has been postponed. And that's also the tragedy of the Libyan uprising in 2011. Spectacular courage of young men and women. But at the same time, when they get rid of the Gaddafi's dictatorship, they really don't know what to do. And then now they are fighting each other like hell. And everybody's going to lose in that.
So I think we have time for just one more question.
How about students? I want to hear from students this time. Come on, guys. I promise to be kind to you.
Ali.
Huh? Oh, okay.
Given that General Graziani's settler colonialism was successful, or that it stuck in Libya, was the Italian shooting for a settler colonialism structure that was similar to that of the South African apartheid, where they had a majority racialized labor force, or were they shooting for more of an extermination of the Libyan population? And specifically going off of that, how did they treat families that were giving birth, or have pregnant women? What would they do with the children, given that they were born in the concentration camps?
Very good question, John. The Italian policy changed from 1911 until 1922. The so-called liberal colonization was really a military conquest, and then in 1914, because of World War I, they gave autonomy to local leadership, including the first republic in the Arab world called the Tripolitanian Republic, 1918, 1920. And they gave autonomy to Eastern Libya's Sanusia movement. When the Italian came, the fascists came in 22, they said, oh, enough of this autonomy thing. Interesting thing that the Tripolitanian Republic sent a message to the American government to the European government, asking them that we are people like you, we exercise our self-determination to be independent in Libya, and nobody answered them. But the fascists, they refused that, and they were really their dream, and the documents testify to that. They want Libya to become a settler colony. And that's explains some of the brutality that pursued after that. And in that sense, then, especially Eastern Libya was seen as extension of Italy and fertile land, a lot of water resources, and it will be a good place for that. Now we know, not on the case of Libya, but all settler colonies are the most brutal. If you look around, folks, and that's not, Italian fascist Libya was no exception. All the settler colonies are the most brutal, especially when we have settlers. South Africa lasted longer. Libya, if it wasn't the Allies, accident of history, who defeated the Italian fascists, it could have been probably become another very, very, another Algeria. That's the model that I have in mind. But sometimes history works in a very, very unexpected way. The Allies defeated the German and the Italian forces. They took over Libya, Tunisia. American arms also landed. The rest of North Africa. And then they couldn't agree on the future of Libya, so they turned it to the United Nations. And United Nations created a kingdom, a federal kingdom called the Federal Kingdom of Libya. And that's how Libya gained independence. As far as the birth within the camps, I asked also a question about, did you guys have marriages? Did you, where kids were born there? What happened to children? And the question varied from one camp to another. Some camps were very brutal, and they said, yes, there were some marriages, but some lasted, some did not last. Always they say to us, I said, some were born in the camps, but they say what hurt us is they will give us only some aspirin for a lot of illnesses. And they became so malnutrition, most people died, including cases of pregnancy in the camps. So the record is very, very, very horrible. And the medical inspector of these camps had a report that was very, very damning, reporting who died and why they died in the camps. So settler colonialism was part of it. It was brutal, but it could have been even more in the long term. My father was among few people in the village where I was born who was allowed to go to Italian school. He told me they will not allow the natives, the fascists, to go beyond 6th grade. That's why Libya, when it became independent in 1951, I looked at the record how many people have university degree, 15. The population of Libya in 1900 was 1.5 million. The population of Libya in 1951 was 1 million. Just to give you an idea what the statistical evidence.
Hey, so I just want to say thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Ali, for letting us hear.
Thank you very much.